Claire Anderson's hands trembled against the white tablecloth. She sat perfectly still at table 12 in Rossetti's Italian restaurant, staring at the flickering candle in front of her, while the sounds of Christmas Eve celebrations swirled around her. Laughter, clinking glasses, children squealing with excitement over sugar cookies shaped like reindeer, families together, and she was alone. The chair across from her was empty. Derek, her blind date, the man her sister had sworn was perfect for her, had walked out 15 minutes ago. Not because of an emergency, not because something came up. He'd left because he never wanted to be there in the first place. His words still burned in her ears, sharp as glass. I only came to get my mother off my back. I'm kind of already seeing someone. It's complicated, but I'm not really available. Then he'd looked her up and down in her waitress uniform, the one she'd worn on her double shift that day, because there hadn't been time to go home and change. His lip had curled just slightly, enough for her to catch it. Sorry you got all dressed up for nothing. Well, not dressed up, but you know what I mean. She'd sat there frozen while he stood, pulled on his coat, and walked away without looking back. Through the window, she could still see his expensive car pulling out of the parking lot, red taillights disappearing into the December night. Claire pressed her palms flat against the table, willing herself not to cry. Not here. Not in front of all these people. Not in the restaurant where she'd served lunch shifts for the past 14 months. Where Tony, the manager, had given her a pitying look when Derek left. Where Maria, her coworker, had squeezed her shoulder and whispered that men were trash. She'd spent an hour on her makeup before her shift this morning, chosen her favorite pearl earrings, the ones her grandmother had given her before she passed. She'd turned down a chance to drive home to Ohio to see her family because her sister had been so insistent. This could be the one, Claire. Just give him a chance. She'd given him a chance, and he'd looked at her uniform and decided she wasn't worth 30 more minutes of his time. The humiliation pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. This wasn't just about tonight. This was about every failed relationship, every man who'd looked right through her, every time she'd hoped and been disappointed. At 31 years old, she was starting to believe something was fundamentally wrong with her, that she was the common denominator in all her romantic failures. 2 years ago, she'd been engaged. She'd had a teaching job she loved at Westbrook Elementary, a fiancé who'd promised her forever, a future that looked bright and certain. Then the complaint came. The parents who'd accused her of overstepping boundaries with their daughter, of getting too emotionally involved, of trying to replace the child's mother. The school had asked her to resign rather than fight it. Nathan had called off the engagement 2 weeks later, saying he couldn't handle the drama, couldn't be with someone whose judgment was that questionable. Now she served pasta to families who'd never know she'd once had dreams of her own classroom, her own students. She worked doubles at Rossetti's and morning shifts at Dr. Patterson's medical clinic, and at the end of each month, she barely had enough left over after rent and student loans to buy groceries. A waiter passed by, giving her a sympathetic glance. He'd watched Derek leave. They all had. Claire blinked rapidly, but the tears were building anyway. Hot, insistent, unstoppable. She just needed 1 minute to compose herself. Then she'd clock back in for the evening rush, serve happy families their Christmas Eve dinners, and drive home alone to her studio apartment where she'd spend the holiday watching other people's lives through her window. But before that minute could pass, she heard a small voice. "Excuse me, are you okay?" Claire looked down. Standing beside her table was a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with wild blonde curls that stuck out in every direction and bright hazel eyes full of concern. She wore a red velvet dress with white trim and a small bow that was sliding out of her hair. Claire tried to compose her face, tried to force a smile through the tightness in her throat. I'm fine, sweetie. Thank you for asking." The little girl tilted her head, studying Claire with an intensity that felt almost adult, as if she could see straight through the lie to the broken pieces underneath. "But you look sad. My daddy says it's okay to be sad sometimes, but you shouldn't be sad all by yourself. That makes it worse." The simple wisdom of it cracked something open in Claire's chest. A laugh escaped, watery and broken, but genuine. "That's very wise advice. My daddy is very smart." The confidence in the child's voice was absolute. the kind of certainty only children possess before the world taught them to doubt. That's him over there. He's not very good at braiding hair, but he makes really good pancakes on Saturdays, and he does funny voices when he reads stories. Claire followed the girl's gesture and saw a man frozen in his seat 3 tables away, his face a mixture of mortification and concern. He was tall, probably mid-30s, with dark hair and kind eyes that even from a distance carried a weight she recognized. The weight of someone who'd known real loss. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. He stood quickly and hurried over, reaching for the little girl's hand, his expensive suit jacket perfectly tailored, his watch the kind that cost more than Claire made in 6 months. I am so sorry. She has absolutely no concept of boundaries. I do too have boundaries. I just don't like them. Despite everything, despite the humiliation still burning in her chest, despite the tears still threatening to fall, Claire laughed. Really laughed. Please don't apologize. She's wonderful. The man's shoulders relaxed slightly, but before he could respond, the little girl turned her attention back to Claire with the single-minded focus of a child on a mission. She tugged on his sleeve. Daddy, the lady is all alone on Christmas Eve. That's really sad. Can we eat dinner with her, please? Pretty please with sprinkles? The man's face flushed red, a flush that crept up from his collar to his hairline. Emma, sweetheart, we can't just invite ourselves to. It's okay. Claire surprised herself with the words. Really, you don't have to feel obligated. But the little girl, Emma, wasn't giving up. She looked at Claire with such earnest hope that it was almost impossible to resist, the kind of hope that hadn't yet learned that the world didn't always bend to wishes and wanting. Please, I can tell you about my Christmas list. I asked for a purple bicycle and also a dog, but Daddy says maybe on the dog. Maybe means probably not, but I'm still hoping. Claire looked at the man again, and something passed between them in that moment. A recognition, perhaps, an understanding that only people who'd known real loneliness could share. His eyes held questions and caution, but also something softer, something that suggested he knew exactly what it felt like to sit alone in a crowded room and feel invisible. He extended his hand, and she noticed the slight tremor in it, as if he was as nervous about this as she was. I'm Marcus Sullivan, and this little negotiator is Emma. Everyone calls me Emma, the girl added quickly, her enthusiasm undimmed. Except Grandma when I'm in trouble. Then she says Emma Rose Sullivan in a really loud voice. Claire shook Marcus's hand. His grip was warm, steady, the hand of someone who'd learned to hold things together even when everything wanted to fall apart. I'm Claire Anderson. Marcus hesitated, and Claire could see him weighing the decision, could see the careful consideration of a man who'd learned to protect what mattered most. Then he smiled, a genuine kind smile that reached his eyes and softened the lines of worry around them. Would you like some company? No pressure at all, but I'm told the breadsticks here are the best in the whole wide world. Claire looked at them, this earnest man with kind eyes and his irrepressible daughter in her red velvet dress, and felt something shift in her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope, like the possibility that maybe Christmas Eve didn't have to be the worst night of her life after all. I'd like that very much. Emma insisted on sitting between them. She climbed into the chair Derek had vacated 20 minutes ago, the chair that had represented rejection and humiliation, and immediately launched into a detailed explanation of why Rapunzel was obviously the best Disney princess. She has the longest hair and also a chameleon named Pascal, who changes colors and doesn't judge people. Marcus caught Claire's eye and mouthed an apology over Emma's head, but Claire shook her head, smiling. The truth was, Emma's enthusiasm was exactly what she needed. A distraction from the humiliation still sitting heavy in her stomach, from the voice in her head that kept replaying Derek's dismissive tone when he looked at her uniform. The waiter appeared, Tony himself, looking relieved to see Claire was no longer alone. His expression said he'd been worried about her, that he'd seen what happened and wanted to help but hadn't known how. Can I start you folks off with some drinks? Hot chocolate. Emma announced this as if it were a royal decree. With extra marshmallows, please. And can you make them into a snowman shape? Tony grinned, the kind of grin that said he'd been working in restaurants long enough to know that kids like Emma made the job worthwhile. I'll see what I can do. After they'd ordered, breadsticks for the table as promised, along with pasta for Emma, chicken parmesan for Marcus, and lasagna for Claire, an awkward silence settled over them. The kind of silence that came when strangers realized they'd committed to an evening together without knowing what to say. Marcus cleared his throat. So I know this is probably weird, and you absolutely don't have to explain anything. But are you okay? That guy who left? Claire made a decision. Honesty seemed easier than pretending, easier than constructing elaborate lies about why she'd been sitting alone in a restaurant on Christmas Eve looking like her world had ended. Blind date, my sister set it up. He showed up 20 minutes late and informed me he was only here to appease his mother. Apparently, he's kind of seeing someone, but came anyway just so he could tell his mom he tried. Marcus's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. Whatever he was thinking, it wasn't polite. I don't even have words for how horrible that is. It's Christmas Eve. Claire's voice cracked slightly, despite her best efforts to keep it steady. I turned down dinner with my family for this. I actually thought. She stopped herself, shaking her head. The rest of that sentence, the admission of how much hope she'd carried into tonight, felt too pathetic to say out loud. That man is a jerk face. Emma declared this with such conviction, such absolute certainty in her moral judgment, that both adults burst out laughing. Marcus tried to sound stern, but he was fighting a smile. Emma, we don't call people jerk faces. But he is one, Daddy. He made Miss Claire sad on Christmas Eve. That's what jerk faces do. You're not wrong, sweetheart, but we still can't say it. Can I think it really loud? Yes, you can think it as loud as you want. Claire wiped her eyes, surprised to find she was smiling through the tears. Thank you, Emma, for defending my honor. Emma reached across the table and patted Claire's hand with such solemnity it was almost comical, the gesture of a tiny adult trying to comfort someone much larger than herself. You're welcome. My daddy says good people shouldn't be sad, and you seem like a really good people. The breadsticks arrived, and Emma immediately grabbed one, declaring it the best in the whole wide world, just as she'd promised. Between bites, she peppered Claire with questions, each one fired off with the rapid intensity of a child who'd never learned to filter curiosity. What's your favorite color? Green, like this dress. Do you like dogs? I love dogs. Do you think Daddy should let me get a dog? Marcus interjected quickly, his voice carrying the weariness of someone who'd had this conversation many times. Emma, you can't recruit strangers to your cause. She's not a stranger anymore, Daddy. She's Miss Claire. That's different. Claire found herself relaxing for the first time all evening. There was something disarming about Emma's unfiltered enthusiasm, something that made it impossible to stay trapped in her own spiral of self-pity. Something healing about Marcus's quiet kindness, the way he looked at his daughter with such obvious love, such fierce protectiveness. When their entrees arrived, the conversation flowed more naturally. Marcus asked about her work, and Claire explained she was actually between careers, that she worked at Rossetti's and also at a medical clinic in the mornings. She didn't mention the teaching, didn't want to explain the whole complicated mess of what had happened at Westbrook. 2 jobs. Marcus's voice carried respect, not pity. That's impressive. It's necessary. Claire kept her voice light, but there was truth underneath it. Student loans don't pay themselves. His face lit up when Emma started talking about starting kindergarten in the fall, how she was already practicing her letters, how she wanted to learn everything about everything. I can write my whole name, EMMA. It's not a very long name, but I'm very good at it. That's impressive. Claire meant it genuinely. Most kids Emma's age were still working on their first names, still figuring out the difference between letters and numbers. Daddy says I get my smartness from my mommy. Emma said this matter-of-factly, then took another bite of pasta as if she hadn't just referenced something heavy, something that carried weight. Claire saw something flash across Marcus's face. Pain, quickly hidden. She didn't press, sensing there was a story there he wasn't ready to tell, a wound that hadn't fully healed. Instead, she asked Emma about her favorite books, and the little girl launched into an elaborate summary of a story about a dragon who was afraid of fire. Marcus jumped in occasionally to correct timeline details. and Claire found herself genuinely enjoying the chaos of their dynamic. The way Emma's imagination ran wild, and Marcus tried to gently guide it back to reality. The way they moved around each other like a team, like people who'd been doing this dance together for a long time. When Emma excused herself to go to the bathroom with Ruth, Marcus's mother, supervising from a distance, Claire sat back in her chair and took a deep breath. An hour ago, she'd been on the verge of breaking down. Now she was laughing, actually laughing. How had this happened? Marcus returned with Emma, who had somehow convinced him to let her get dessert. Just a small one, it's Christmas Eve. We can break the rules a little. Rules are made to be broken. Emma said this with the wisdom of someone who'd heard it said many times. Grandma Ruth says that all the time. Grandma Ruth says that when she sneaks you extra cookies, not as a life philosophy. Claire found herself telling them about her family, her older sister, who meant well, but was constantly trying to fix Claire's love life. Her parents, who lived in Charlottesville and still treated her like she was 18. She told them about the little boy in one of her former classes who'd insisted on bringing his pet rock to show and tell every single week. Former classes? Marcus picked up on the detail immediately, his attention sharpening. Claire hesitated, then decided there was no point in hiding it. I was a kindergarten teacher. I lost my job last year. There was a misunderstanding with a student's family. They felt I overstepped boundaries trying to help their daughter. The school asked me to resign rather than fight it. She waited for judgment, for the same look Nathan had given her. The look that said her judgment was questionable, that she couldn't be trusted. But Marcus just nodded slowly. That must have been devastating. It was. Teaching was my dream. Now I'm just trying to figure out what comes next. You'll figure it out. He said this with such quiet certainty, as if he could see something in her that she couldn't see in herself. Anyone who cares enough to overstep boundaries trying to help a kid, that's someone who should be teaching. Emma returned her attention to Claire, sliding closer on her chair. You seem nice. Are you nice, Claire? I try to be. I think you are. I can tell these things. I have good instincts. Marcus smiled. She does, actually. Better than mine most of the time. 2 hours passed, then 3. Claire had forgotten what it felt like to be part of something, to sit at a table and feel like she belonged there. Emma eventually started to fade, her enthusiastic chatter slowing down, her eyes beginning to close. I'm not tired. I'm just resting my eyelids. Marcus smiled softly, the kind of smile that said he'd heard this before many times, that he knew his daughter's tells. I think that's our cue. We should probably get this little one home before she falls asleep in her tiramisu. Claire felt a pang of disappointment sharp enough to surprise her. She wasn't ready for the evening to end, wasn't ready to go back to being alone. Of course, thank you for joining me, for saving my Christmas Eve. I think Emma deserves the credit. She's the brave one. They paid the bill. Marcus insisted on covering everything despite Claire's protests, and for once she was too tired to fight it, too grateful for the kindness to argue about pride. They made their way to the parking lot, Emma fully awake again now that they were outside, running ahead to look at the Christmas lights strung along the restaurant's exterior. She's really special, Claire said quietly, watching the little girl twirl under the lights, her red dress spinning out around her. She is. There was so much love in Marcus's voice, so much pride, that Claire felt her chest tighten. She saved me, honestly, after... He trailed off, then seemed to make a decision. After my wife passed away 3 years ago, Emma was only 2. I don't know how I would have survived without her. Claire's breath caught. I'm so sorry. It was cancer, rare autoimmune condition that attacked her organs one by one. 8 months from diagnosis, too. He couldn't finish that sentence. It still is hard some days. But Emma makes it easier. She makes everything easier. He turned to look at Claire, his expression earnest, vulnerable in a way that suggested he didn't often let people see this side of him. I know this is probably weird, and please don't feel obligated, but would it be too forward if I asked for your number? Not in a weird way. I'd just like to see you again, if you're open to it. Claire felt something warm bloom in her chest, something that felt like possibility, like the beginning of something she couldn't quite name yet. I'd like that too. They exchanged numbers, fingers fumbling with phones in the cold December air. Emma insisted on giving Claire a hug goodbye, wrapping her small arms around Claire's waist with surprising strength. I'm really glad we found you. You have a nice smile. You should smile more. Claire's eyes stung with fresh tears, but these were different. Better. Cleaner. I'm glad you found me too, Emma. Very glad. As Claire drove home that night, she kept replaying the evening in her mind. Derek's cruelty, her despair, and then Emma's small voice asking if she was okay. Marcus's kindness. 3 hours of genuine connection with people who'd started as strangers and felt, by the end, like something more. She'd walked into Rossetti's expecting nothing, expecting to serve other people's happiness, while her own life stayed small and contained. She was leaving with what? Hope. Possibility. She wasn't sure yet, but for the first time in a long time, she was excited to find out. Marcus texted her the next morning. Christmas Day. Claire was sitting in her studio apartment, drinking coffee and watching snow fall past her window, trying not to think about the fact that she was alone while her family celebrated 2 states away. The text made her laugh out loud. Merry Christmas, Claire. Emma wanted me to tell you that Santa brought her the purple bicycle, but not the dog. She's accepting this with grace and dignity. She cried for 10 minutes. Claire typed back through her smile. Merry Christmas to you both. Please tell Emma I'm very sorry about the dog situation. Maybe next year. His response came quickly. You just gave her hope. You realize that, right? She's already planning her Christmas list for next year. Sorry, not sorry. There was a pause, then another message. Listen, I know it's Christmas and you're probably with family, but I was wondering, would you want to get coffee sometime this week? Just us, no 5-year-old chaperone, as much as I love her. Claire's heart raced as she typed her response. I'd love that. They met at a small cafe near the James River on December 27th. Marcus arrived 5 minutes early, looking nervous in a way that Claire found endearing. He'd worn a navy blue sweater that brought out his eyes, and he held the door open for her with old-fashioned courtesy that felt genuine rather than performative. They ordered coffee and found a table by the window where weak winter sunlight filtered through. And then they talked. They talked about everything. Marcus told her about meeting his wife Sarah in college, about how they'd built a life together in Richmond. He told her about the diagnosis, the rare autoimmune condition that had attacked her organs one by one, about the 8 months of fighting that followed. She was so strong. Even at the end, she was thinking about Emma, about making sure I knew how to braid her hair, what songs she liked before bed, how to handle the nightmares. She made me promise I'd keep living, that I wouldn't just shut down. Claire reached across the table and took his hand. Did you? Keep living? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee as if the answer might be written in the foam. Not at first. The first year was just survival, getting through each day, making sure Emma was okay. My mom moved in, which helped, but I was so angry, Claire, at everything, at the universe, at myself for not being able to fix it. That's understandable. Maybe, but it wasn't fair to Emma. She'd lost her mother and she needed her father, and I was just hollow. Working 18-hour days at the Heat-O company, using business as an excuse to not feel anything. He looked up, meeting Claire's eyes. But Emma kept pulling me back. She'd ask me to read stories, to play tea party, to watch cartoons. And eventually I started to feel things again. Started to remember what joy felt like. Then it was Claire's turn. She told him about her string of failed relationships, about the men who'd been emotionally unavailable, or still hung up on exes, or simply not interested in anything serious. She told him about Nathan, about being engaged and having it fall apart the moment things got difficult, about Derek and the humiliation of Christmas Eve, though now with distance it felt less devastating, more like a bad memory that was already starting to fade. I was starting to think I was the problem, that maybe I was asking for too much or expecting things that don't exist. Marcus leaned forward, his voice firm with conviction. You're not the problem, Claire. Trust me on that. Those men were idiots who couldn't recognize what was right in front of them. That's a kind thing to say. It's a true thing to say. They stayed at that cafe for 4 hours until the barista started giving them pointed looks about closing up. When they finally left, walking to their cars in the dimming afternoon light, Marcus turned to Claire. Can I see you again? Soon? Yes, please. Their second date was near New Year's Eve at the public ice skating rink downtown. Emma came along, bundled up in a pink coat and matching hat with a pom-pom on top. Claire hadn't skated since high school, and she wobbled dangerously on the ice until Marcus caught her arm. They made a wobbly circle together, all three of them holding hands, Emma giggling every time one of them nearly fell. This is the best New Year's ever. Even better than last year when Grandma Ruth let me stay up till 9. As midnight approached, Marcus looked at Claire. Can I? She nodded. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, the kiss of two people who'd been hurt before and were learning to trust again. Emma squealed between them. Ooh, but also yay. Claire drove home that night feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Like maybe the future didn't have to look like the past. Like maybe there were second chances waiting in unexpected places. In restaurants on Christmas Eve. In the brave questions of little girls who saw sadness and couldn't walk away. The next afternoon, Ruth pulled Claire aside at Marcus's house while he was getting Emma ready for bed. The older woman's eyes were shrewd, assessing, not unkind but not soft either. You seem like a good person, Claire, but you should know something. What? Ruth's expression was serious. My son has been through hell. Emma is his entire world. He doesn't trust easily anymore. But he trusts you. That means something. She paused, choosing her words carefully. It also means if you hurt him, hurt them, I won't forgive it. Emma's already calling you by your first name. She's attaching. So I need to know, are you in this? Really in this? Claire swallowed hard. Yes, I am. Ruth studied her for a long moment, and Claire had the sense that she was being weighed, measured, evaluated against some internal standard that only mothers possessed. Finally, Ruth nodded. Good, because they deserve someone who stays. Then, more gently, also, you should know, people will talk about the difference between you two. Marcus won't care, but you need to be ready for that. Claire's stomach tightened. What difference? Ruth's expression said she knew Claire understood exactly what she meant. You know what I mean, dear. Claire nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Because yes, she knew. She'd noticed Marcus's expensive watch, his tailored clothes, the casual way he'd paid for dinner without looking at the check. She'd noticed, and she'd been trying not to think about what it meant. Ruth squeezed her shoulder. Just be prepared, that's all I'm saying. The rest will work itself out if it's meant to. Claire left that evening with Ruth's words ringing in her ears. People will talk. The difference between you two, as if love came with a checklist of qualifications, as if the size of your bank account determined who you were allowed to care about. She thought about Derek looking at her uniform with contempt, about Nathan who'd loved her until her life got messy, about every time someone had looked at her and found her lacking. And then she thought about Emma asking if she was okay, about Marcus saying she wasn't the problem, about 4 hours in a cafe talking about everything and nothing, about ice skating and wobbly circles and a kiss at midnight that felt like a promise. Maybe Ruth was right. Maybe people would talk. But maybe, just maybe, some things were worth fighting for anyway. January brought a rhythm that felt almost normal, as if three strangers meeting on Christmas Eve could build something real from nothing but hope and timing. Marcus texted Claire every morning before she left for her clinic shift. Nothing elaborate, just small observations about Emma's latest pronouncement on the nature of clouds or the inherent unfairness of bedtime. Claire found herself checking her phone between patients, smiling at messages that made her feel seen in ways she'd forgotten were possible. Their dates followed a pattern Marcus seemed to have carefully constructed. Dinner on Wednesday evenings when Ruth could watch Emma. Saturday afternoons at the park where Emma fed ducks and asked philosophical questions about why water was wet. Sunday mornings at the pancake house where Emma insisted on sitting between them, narrating her dreams from the night before with the intensity of someone recounting an epic journey. Claire noticed things about Marcus in those early weeks, the way he always ordered for Emma first, anticipating what she'd want before she asked, how he carried hand sanitizer and Band-Aids in his jacket pocket, prepared for scraped knees and sticky fingers. The careful way he talked about Sarah, not avoiding her memory but not dwelling there either, as if he'd learned the exact balance between honoring the past and living in the present. She noticed other things too. The black credit card he used without looking at prices. The way restaurant hosts greeted him by name at places where a single entree cost more than Claire made in a day. The Tesla parked in his driveway, the penthouse address he'd mentioned casually, the fact that Emma's extensive toy collection looked like a department store had exploded in their living room. But Marcus never made her feel less than. When she suggested a pizza place instead of the French restaurant he'd mentioned, he'd agreed immediately. When Emma spilled juice on Claire's thrift store dress and Claire's face went tight with worry about the stain, he just handed her a club soda and a towel without commenting on the dress's obvious age. Valentine's Day fell on a Wednesday. Marcus cooked dinner at his place while Emma was at Ruth's for the evening. Claire arrived to find candles on the dining table, music playing low, and Marcus in the kitchen, wearing an apron that said, "Kiss the chef," that Emma had clearly picked out. "I'm not a great cook." His hands were flour-dusted, his hair slightly mussed. "But I can manage pasta without burning down the building." The meal was simple: spaghetti carbonara, garlic bread, salad from a bag. They ate at his dining table with floor-to-ceiling windows showing the city spread below, like a carpet of lights. Claire tried not to think about how his apartment was larger than some houses, how the art on his walls probably cost more than her car. After dinner, they moved to the couch. Marcus poured wine into glasses that looked antique, delicate. "I need to tell you something." Claire's stomach dropped. Here it came, the revelation that this had been fun, but wasn't serious, that she was a temporary distraction from his grief, that someone like him couldn't really be with someone like her. "I haven't dated anyone since Sarah died. You're the first woman I've even wanted to try with." His voice was quiet, uncertain. "I'm probably doing this all wrong. Moving too fast or too slow, or just wrong." Relief made her dizzy. "You're not doing it wrong. Emma's already attached to you. If this doesn't work out, it'll hurt her. I need to know you're serious about this." Claire set down her wineglass, turned to face him fully. "I'm serious. I'm terrified, but I'm serious." "Why terrified?" She gestured vaguely at the apartment, the view, the life he'd built. "Because this isn't my world. Because I serve food and you own hotels. Because every time someone sees us together, I can feel them wondering what you're doing with me." Marcus took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "You think I care about any of that?" "I think you should." Her voice came out sharper than intended. "I think you should care that people will judge you for being with the help." "Claire." He waited until she met his eyes. "I don't give a damn what people think. I care about Emma. I care about you. Everything else is just noise." They kissed then, soft and searching, the kind of kiss that asked questions neither of them had answers for yet. Later, in his bedroom with moonlight striping the sheets, Claire felt the careful way he touched her, as if she were something precious he was afraid of breaking. She fell asleep with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling something like peace settle into her bones. March brought warmer weather and Emma's insistence that they visit the zoo. The three of them walked through exhibits while Emma narrated everything she saw with enthusiastic inaccuracy. "Look, Daddy, that monkey is eating a banana exactly like how you eat bananas. He's not peeling it all the way first, either." Marcus looked at Claire, mock offense painted on his face. "I'm being judged by my own daughter and a monkey. This is a new low. For what it's worth, I also don't peel my bananas all the way first. Finally, someone understands me." At the penguin exhibit, Emma pressed her face against the glass, watching two penguins waddle side by side across the rocks. "Look, they're holding flippers just like you and Claire hold hands." Marcus glanced down, suddenly aware that he and Claire were in fact holding hands. They'd done it without thinking, their fingers interlacing naturally as they walked. "She's right. We are like the penguins. Penguins mate for life, you know." Claire felt her face flush as soon as the words left her mouth. "Not that I'm saying. I didn't mean to imply." Marcus squeezed her hand, smiling in a way that made her stomach flip. "I know what you meant, and for the record, I like penguins." Something settled into place between them in that moment, unspoken but understood. This wasn't just dating. This was building something that neither of them wanted to name yet, but both of them could feel taking shape. solid and real, and maybe permanent. April brought complications in the form of recognition. Marcus's business partner, Jake, spotted them at a restaurant, stopped by their table to say hello. His eyes flicked from Marcus to Claire and back, curiosity poorly masked behind politeness. The next week, Ruth mentioned that people at her book club were asking questions. The week after that, Claire served up tea at Rossetti's and overheard two women discussing Marcus Sullivan's new girlfriend, the one who was clearly after his money. She'd gone to the bathroom and cried, then fixed her makeup and finished her shift because Bills didn't care about humiliation. That Saturday, Marcus suggested touring Emma's potential kindergarten. The campus was pristine, all brick buildings and manicured lawns. Inside, the classrooms had smart boards and iPads and reading nooks that looked like something from a magazine spread. The admissions director gave them a folder. Claire caught sight of the tuition information. $25,000 a year for kindergarten. Her throat went tight. She made appropriate sounds during the tour, smiled and nodded, but inside she was doing math. $25,000 was nearly everything she made in a year working two jobs. This was what Marcus considered normal. This was Emma's world, and Claire was a visitor in it. Afterward, they sat in his car in the parking lot. Emma had fallen asleep in her booster seat. Marcus turned to Claire. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. It's a beautiful school." "Claire." She closed her eyes, then forced them open. "Marcus, I need to say something, and I need you to really hear me." "I'm listening." "Our lives are very different. You own hotels. I serve food. You send Emma to schools that cost more than I make in a year. You have a penthouse and a Tesla and a watch that probably costs more than my car." Her voice stayed steady through sheer force of will. "How does this work? Long term?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. So I don't want to be the project, the charity case, the poor girl you felt sorry for. Is that what you think this is?" His voice held something sharp now, almost angry. "You think I'm with you because I feel sorry for you? I think people will assume that. I think every time we go somewhere, people will wonder what you're doing with the waitress. I think Emma will grow up in a world I don't understand, with friends whose parents look at me and see the help." The words were tumbling out now, all the fears she'd been holding back since New Year's Eve. "I don't know how to be enough for this life." Marcus reached across the console, took her face in his hands. "Claire, I don't care about any of that. You're not enough for this life. You're the only thing that makes this life feel like living again." "But no, listen to me." His eyes were intense, serious. "I'm falling in love with you, not because I feel sorry for you, not because I'm trying to save you or fix you, because you make me laugh, because Emma lights up when you're around, because you see me, not the money or the hotels or the rest of it, just me." Claire felt tears building, hot and insistent. "I'm scared." "So am I, but we'll figure it out. Together. Okay?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. He kissed her then, gentle and sure, a promise made without words. May brought Emma's kindergarten spring recital. Claire sat next to Ruth in the auditorium, watching Emma dressed as a bright red tulip, waving enthusiastically when she spotted them in the crowd. Ruth leaned over, her voice pitched low under the opening music. "Emma tells me you got a new job. Teaching at a small school?" "Part-time, yes. I'll still work some shifts at the clinic, but it's a start." Ruth nodded slowly. "Marcus is proud of you. He talks about it constantly. He's been very supportive. He loves you, you know." Ruth's voice was matter-of-fact. "I've never seen him like this with anyone except Sarah. You're different. You see the man, not the money." Claire's throat felt tight. "I'm trying to be worth that." Ruth turned to look at her fully. "You already are. Stop trying to prove something that's already true." After the recital, Emma ran to them, her tulip costume slightly askew. She launched herself at Claire first, then Marcus, then back to Claire. "Did you see me? Did you see me? I didn't forget any of my lines." "You were the best tulip I've ever seen." Emma beamed. "That's what I told Daddy. I'm the most important flower because tulips come first in spring." They took Emma for ice cream afterward. The four of them crowded into a booth at a local parlor that had been there since Ruth was a child. Emma got chocolate with sprinkles, managed to get most of it on her face rather than in her mouth. Claire reached over with a napkin, wiped Emma's cheeks, and looked up to find Ruth watching them with something soft in her expression. June brought honesty in the form of a conversation Claire had been avoiding. They were at Marcus's penthouse, Emma asleep down the hall, when Claire brought it up. I need to tell you something about what happened at Westbrook. Marcus looked up from his laptop, closed it. Okay, I got too involved with a student, a little girl whose family was struggling. She came to school, hungry sometimes, wearing the same clothes multiple days in a row. I started buying her lunch, keeping extra snacks in my desk. Then I started driving her home when her mom's car broke down. Claire's hands twisted in her lap. Her parents were going through a divorce. The mother found out I'd been helping and thought I was trying to replace her. She complained to the school. They investigated, found I'd violated about a dozen policies, asked me to resign. Did you cross a line? Claire had asked herself this question 1,000 times in the 14 months since. Yes, I got emotionally invested. I saw a kid who needed help, and I helped without thinking about boundaries or policies or what was appropriate. And if you had it to do over, I'd follow proper channels. I'd report to social services instead of trying to fix it myself. She met his eyes. But I'd still help her. I'd just do it the right way. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You know what I hear when you tell me that story? I hear someone who cares so much about kids that she was willing to sacrifice her career to help one who needed it. That's not a character flaw, Claire. That's who you are. Nathan didn't see it that way, my ex-fiancé. When the school asked me to resign, he called off our engagement, said he couldn't be with someone whose judgment was that questionable. Then Nathan was an idiot who didn't deserve you. Claire felt something loosen in her chest, something that had been clenched tight since the day she'd cleaned out her classroom. You really believe that? I really believe that. July brought a trip to Marcus's beach house in the Outer Banks. Emma was beside herself with excitement, listing all the things they were going to do before they'd even finished packing the car. Build sandcastles, look for shells, swim in the ocean, eat ice cream every single day because Daddy said rules could be broken at the beach. The house was beautiful in a way that made Claire's chest ache. 3 stories of windows facing the ocean, a deck that wrapped around the entire structure, rooms decorated in whites and blues that looked professionally staged. Ruth had driven separately, arriving an hour after them with a trunk full of groceries and the kind of organizational efficiency that suggested she'd done this many times before. The first day was perfect. Emma built sandcastles with architectural precision that made Marcus beam. That's my girl. Strong foundation, good structural support. Daddy, it's a sandcastle, not a building. All castles are buildings, sweetheart, even sand ones. Claire helped Emma collect shells, sorting them by color and size into elaborate categories that only made sense to a 6-year-old mind. Ruth watched from her beach chair, reading a mystery novel, but occasionally glancing up with something that looked almost like approval in her expression. The second evening, after Emma had fallen asleep and Ruth had volunteered to stay with her, Marcus asked Claire if she wanted to walk along the beach. The moon hung low over the water like a silver coin. The waves were gentle, rhythmic, soothing. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, shoes dangling from their hands, feet sinking into cool wet sand. Finally, Marcus spoke. I need to tell you something. Claire stopped walking, turned to face him. You don't have to if you're not ready. I want to. You deserve to know, and I need to say it out loud to you. He took both her hands in his. I'm not trying to replace Sarah. I could never do that, and I wouldn't want to. She'll always be Emma's mother. But I think there's room in our lives for more love. For you, if you want that. Claire felt tears spill down her cheeks, warm against the cool night air. I want that so much. It won't always be easy. Emma has nightmares sometimes. She asks about her mom, wonders why she had to die. I'm still figuring out how to be both parents, how to answer questions I don't have answers for. His voice roughened, and I'm terrified of screwing this up, of letting her down, of letting you down. You won't, and even if you did, we'd figure it out together. That's what people do when they... She stopped, realizing what she was about to say, what she'd been feeling for weeks but hadn't named. When they what? Claire took a breath, dove in. When they love each other. The words hung in the air between them, enormous and fragile and true. Marcus's face transformed, something raw and beautiful breaking across his features. You love me? Yes, I love you both. I didn't expect it to happen this fast, but it did, and I'm not sorry. Marcus pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could feel his heartbeat against her chest, fast and hard and real. I love you too, Claire. God, I love you too. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, while the waves rolled in and the moon watched overhead. Claire felt the last piece of her broken heart click back into place, felt something shift in her chest that felt like coming home after a long journey through unfamiliar territory. August arrived with Emma's 6th birthday and a level of excitement that was almost audible. The party was held at a public park Marcus had reserved for the afternoon, complete with a bouncy castle, a face painter, and more cupcakes than any group of children could reasonably consume. Claire had helped Marcus plan everything, laughing at his stress over whether they'd ordered enough juice boxes. It's a birthday party, not a military operation. Tell that to 6-year-olds when they run out of juice. The party was chaotic success. Emma ran around with her friends, her face painted like a butterfly, her laughter carrying across the park on warm summer air. Ruth managed the gift table with the efficiency of a seasoned general. Marcus spent most of the afternoon making sure no child fell out of the bouncy castle. As the party wound down and parents started collecting their exhausted children, Emma found Claire sitting at one of the picnic tables. She climbed onto Claire's lap without asking, her small body warm and sweaty and smelling like sunscreen and sugar. Did you have fun? The best fun ever. This was the best birthday ever. I'm so glad, sweetie. Emma was quiet for a moment, playing with Claire's hair, her fingers gentle and contemplative. Then she looked up, her hazel eyes serious. Claire, can I ask you something? Of course. Anything. Are you going to come to all my birthday parties? Like, every single one? Claire's heart stuttered in her chest. I'd like that very much, if you want me to. I do want you to. I want you to come to all of them. Forever and ever. Emma paused, her little face scrunching up in concentration. I want you to be my family. Like how Grandma Ruth is my family. Can you be my family too? Claire felt tears building, hot and insistent. Oh, Emma. Because I love you, and Daddy loves you too. I can tell. And you love us, right? So you should be my family. That's how it works. Claire wrapped her arms around Emma more tightly, burying her face in the little girl's hair. I love you so much. Then you should be mine. Can you be mine? Claire looked over Emma's shoulder and saw Marcus watching them from across the park. Their eyes met, and even from a distance she could see the emotion on his face. The hope and fear and love all mixed together. Yes, I can be yours. I want to be yours. Emma pulled back, satisfied. Good, that's settled then. Later that night, after Emma had crashed from sugar overload and Ruth had gone home, Marcus pulled Claire close on the couch. She asked me earlier if you could be her family. She wanted to know if that was allowed, if it was okay for her to love you like that. What did you tell her? I told her it was more than okay. I told her it was wonderful. He kissed Claire's forehead, his lips warm against her skin. She sees what I see, that you're special, that you're meant to be with us. You make it easy. September brought settling in. Claire had been part of their daily routine for 9 months now, woven into the fabric of their lives in ways that felt permanent. She had a drawer at Marcus's place, a toothbrush in his bathroom. Emma called her by her first name naturally now, though sometimes she'd slip and say something that sounded almost like Mama before quickly correcting herself. Claire's teaching job had started in late August, part-time at a small progressive school that paid less than Rossetti's but made her feel like she was doing what she was meant to do. Marcus had celebrated with champagne and an enthusiasm that made her feel seen, valued, worthy. I'm so proud of you. It's just part-time. It doesn't pay much. But you're doing what you love. That's what matters. She'd quit the clinic job, kept a few shifts at Rossetti's because the extra money helped and because Maria was there, and some friendships were worth holding on to. But mostly she taught. Mostly she came home to Marcus's apartment where Emma would run to greet her, where Ruth would have dinner started, where Marcus would pull her close and kiss her like she was something precious. It felt like a life. It felt like a family. It felt like everything she'd stopped believing she deserved. October arrived with a decision Marcus had been considering for weeks. He called Rossetti's, spoke to Tony directly. I need a reservation for tonight. Table 12, if it's available. Tony's voice carried a smile. Of course, Mr. Sullivan. I remember you both. That table will be waiting. Marcus dropped Emma at Ruth's house that afternoon. His daughter was vibrating with barely contained excitement, bouncing on her toes. You're going to ask her tonight, right, Daddy? You're going to ask her to be our family forever. That's the plan, sweetheart. And she's going to say yes, right? She has to say yes. Marcus knelt down to Emma's level, took her small hands in his. I hope so. I really, really hope so. Emma threw her arms around him, squeezing tight. She will. I know she will because she loves us. I can tell. Ruth watched this exchange from the doorway, her expression soft. Go get ready. Don't keep her waiting. Marcus drove home, showered, changed into his best suit. The ring he'd bought 3 weeks ago sat in its velvet box in his pocket, small and solid and terrifying. He'd picked it out with Emma, letting his daughter help choose the setting, the stone. She'd been so serious about it, examining each option with the gravity of someone making a life-altering decision. He texted Claire at 6:30. Can you meet me at Rossetti's tonight? 7 p.m.? Wear the green dress. Her response came quickly. The green dress? What's the occasion? You'll see. Marcus arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, too nervous to wait at home. Tony showed him to table 12, the same table where Claire had been sitting alone 10 months ago. The same table where Emma had walked over and asked if she was okay. The same table where everything had started. He ordered wine, checked his phone, adjusted the flowers he'd asked Tony to put on the table. His hands were shaking. He'd built a business empire from the ground up, had negotiated million-dollar deals, had faced down board members and competitors in financial disasters. But nothing had ever made him this nervous, because nothing had ever mattered this much. Claire arrived at 7 exactly, walking through the door in the emerald green dress she'd worn that first night. Her hair was down, loose around her shoulders. She looked beautiful and nervous and perfect. Marcus stood when he saw her, suddenly unsure if he should hug her or kiss her or just sit down. They'd been together for months, had slept together, had built a life together. But right now he felt like that man from Christmas Eve, uncertain and hopeful and terrified of making the wrong move. She sat down across from him, smiling. You remembered the dress. How could I forget? This is where it all began. They ordered wine and breadsticks, Emma's favorites. Claire talked about a little boy in her class who'd brought a pet rock to show and tell, insisting it was a rare geological specimen. Marcus laughed in all the right places, but his mind was elsewhere, running through what he wanted to say, how he wanted to say it. After their entrees had been cleared, he reached across the table and took her hand. Claire, do you remember this place? Of course, this is where we met. This is where you were sitting, alone and heartbroken because some idiot had walked out on you. This is where my daughter, who was braver than I'll ever be, walked up to you and asked if you were okay. This is where everything changed. His voice was shaking slightly, but he pushed through. These past 10 months have been the most incredible of my life. You've been so patient with me, with Emma, with all of it, with my grief and my caution and my fear of getting this wrong. Claire's eyes were already glistening with tears. Marcus, let me finish. He squeezed her hand. You've never tried to replace what I lost. You've just added to it, made it bigger, made it better, made it feel like living instead of just surviving. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. I love you. Emma loves you. I don't want to imagine my life without you in it. He stood up, but he didn't kneel. Not yet. Claire watched him, her expression a mixture of hope and confusion and something that looked like Poe fighting to break free. I'm not asking you to marry me, not tonight. He saw her face do something complicated, saw the flicker of disappointment quickly masked. Because I want to do this right. I want Emma to be part of it when that time comes. But I am asking you this. He took both her hands in his, held them firmly. Will you be part of our family? Will you let us be part of yours? Will you take this chance with us? Claire was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Yes, yes, Marcus, to all of it. Yes. They kissed across the table, awkward and perfect, and the restaurant around them erupted in applause from diners who'd been watching without them noticing. Marcus paid the check and they walked to the parking lot, hands linked, both of them dazed and happy, and slightly uncertain what came next. Marcus pulled out his phone. I need to call Emma. She made me promise to call the second you said yes. Ruth answered on the first ring. Well, she said yes. There was a rustling sound, then Emma's voice exploded through the speaker. She said yes? She said yes. I knew it. I knew she would say yes. Emma's squeal was so loud they both had to hold the phone away from their ears. In the background, they could hear Ruth laughing. I knew it the very first second I saw her, Daddy. I knew she was supposed to be ours. Marcus looked at Claire, standing there in her green dress with tears on her cheeks and love in her eyes, and felt something settle into place that had been broken for 3 years. You're right, Emma. She was always supposed to be ours. Part 2. Complete word count. 5,523. Emma's voice continued through the speaker, high and breathless with joy. This is the best day ever. Better than my birthday. Better than when I got my purple bicycle. Can we have pancakes tomorrow to celebrate? With chocolate chips? And can Claire come? Please, please, please. Marcus laughed, the sound free and unguarded in a way Claire hadn't heard before. Yes to all of the above. She'll be there. Best day ever. Emma's enthusiasm was infectious, spilling through the phone and filling the parking lot. Then quieter, more serious. Daddy, can I talk to Claire? Marcus handed over his phone. Claire pressed it to her ear, her voice still thick with tears. Hi, Emma. Hi, Claire. I just wanted to say I'm really glad my daddy found you. Or that I found you. Or that we all found each other. Emma's words tumbled over themselves in her rush to get them out. And I'm really glad you're going to be my family now, forever and ever. Claire had to wipe her eyes again. Mascara be damned. I'm glad too, sweetie. So glad. Okay, I'm going to go now because Grandma Ruth says I need to calm down before bedtime. But I love you, okay? I love you too, Emma. See you tomorrow for celebration pancakes. After they hung up, Marcus and Claire stood in the parking lot of Rossetti's, holding each other under the October stars. The same restaurant where they'd met. The same place where Claire's worst Christmas Eve had turned into the beginning of something beautiful. Thank you. Marcus's voice was quiet against her hair. For what? For taking a chance on us. On me. On a single dad with a chaotic 6-year-old and a lot of baggage. Claire pulled back to look at him. She's not chaotic. She's perfect. You both are. We're a package deal, you know. Me and Emma. You can't have one without the other. I wouldn't want to. I want both of you, all of you. The good days and the hard days. The pancakes and the nightmares, all of it. Marcus kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Claire knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The next morning, Claire showed up at Marcus's penthouse at 9 sharp, carrying fresh strawberries and whipped cream for the pancakes. Emma answered the door before Marcus could reach it, still in her pajamas, and threw herself at Claire with such force they both nearly toppled over. You came. I knew you would come. Of course I came. I promised celebration pancakes, didn't I? Emma grabbed Claire's hand and dragged her toward the kitchen where Marcus was already mixing batter, his hair still damp from the shower. Ruth was setting the table with a kind of precision that suggested decades of hosting family breakfasts, every fork and napkin aligned just so. When they saw Claire, both of them smiled. Ruth walked over and pulled her into a hug that was brief but genuine, the kind of hug that said welcome without needing words. Welcome to the family. That was it. No ceremony, no grand announcement. Just acceptance. Simple and complete. They made pancakes together, all 4 of them crowded into Marcus's kitchen that was large enough for a restaurant but somehow felt cozy with the right people in it. Emma insisted on helping, which meant there was batter on every surface and chocolate chips scattered across the floor. But no one cared. They were too busy laughing, too busy being together, too busy building something that felt like the start of forever. Claire flipping pancakes while Marcus chopped strawberries. Emma narrated everything they did as if documenting it for history. Ruth made coffee and orange juice and kept up a running commentary about how Marcus had never been able to cook before Sarah died, how he'd learned because Emma needed him to, how love made people capable of things they'd thought impossible. They sat around the table eating pancakes, drowning in syrup and strawberries, and Emma raised her glass of orange juice with exaggerated solemnity. "I want to make a toast." Everyone lifted their glasses, waiting. To family, and to Claire, who is the best family ever, and to Daddy for finally being brave, and to me for walking over to her table that night, even though Daddy said I had no boundaries. Marcus tried to look stern, but couldn't manage it through his smile. I stand by that statement. To family! They all echoed, clinking glasses together, orange juice and coffee and happiness spilling over into laughter. Claire looked around the table at Marcus with his kind eyes and terrible pancake flipping skills, at Emma with her wild blonde curls and her fearless heart, at Ruth with her gruff warmth and her quiet approval. She realized something in that moment, watching syrup drip onto the expensive tablecloth that no one seemed to care about. Sometimes the worst moments in life were doorways to something you never could have imagined. October folded into November with an ease that surprised Claire. She'd expected some massive shift after Marcus's declaration, some fundamental change in how they moved through the world. But instead, everything just settled more deeply into place, as if they'd been building toward this all along and had finally reached stable ground. She still kept her studio apartment, still paid her own rent, but she spent most nights at Marcus's place. Emma had started calling her Claire with a possessive quality, as in my Claire when talking to friends at school. Sometimes the little girl would slip and say something that sounded like the beginning of Mama before quickly correcting herself, her eyes darting to Marcus as if checking whether this was allowed. Marcus always just smiled and squeezed Emma's hand, letting her navigate this new terrain at her own pace. Claire's teaching job had fully bloomed by November. The small progressive school where she worked valued creativity over standardization, gave her freedom to design lesson plans that actually engaged her students. She came home energized rather than drained, full of stories about the little boy who'd insisted that dinosaurs still existed in remote jungles, the girl who'd written a play about a princess who saved herself. Marcus loved hearing about her days. He'd ask detailed questions over dinner, genuinely interested in the minutiae of kindergarten drama, and Claire felt seen in a way she hadn't since her early days at Westbrook before everything fell apart. Ruth had fully accepted Claire into the family fold, inviting her to book club meetings and asking her opinion on Emma's wardrobe choices. The older woman still maintained a certain reserve, a protective distance that said she was watching to make sure Claire didn't hurt her son or granddaughter. But underneath that caution was growing warmth, the kind that suggested Ruth was starting to believe this might actually last. Thanksgiving arrived with an invitation to join Marcus's extended family gathering at his uncle's house in Virginia. Claire met cousins and aunts and uncles who all seemed to have been briefed on who she was and why she mattered. They were kind, welcoming, though she caught some of them exchanging glances that suggested curiosity about the kindergarten teacher dating the CEO. Emma stayed glued to Claire's side all day, showing her off like a prized possession. "This is my Claire. She's going to be my family forever." Marcus's cousin James pulled him aside at one point, his voice pitched low, but not low enough. "She seems great, man. Really great. Just, you sure about this?" Marcus's response was immediate and firm. "More sure than I've been about anything since Sarah." December arrived with the one-year anniversary of their meeting approaching. Marcus had been planning something, Claire could tell, but he kept the details to himself. Emma was vibrating with a secret, constantly on the verge of spilling it before catching herself and pressing her lips together dramatically. "What are you two plotting?" Marcus tried for innocent. "Nothing." "You're terrible liars," Emma giggled. "That's what Grandma Ruth says, too." Christmas Eve arrived and Marcus insisted they dress nicely. "We're going somewhere special." "Where?" "You'll see." They drove to Rossetti's and Claire felt her chest tighten with recognition. This was where it had started. This was where Emma had seen her crying, and decided loneliness was unacceptable. This was where her life had split into before and after. Tony greeted them at the door, his smile knowing. Mr. Sullivan, Miss Anderson, welcome back. And Miss Emma, you've grown. Emma beamed at being remembered. I'm 6 now, I was 5 last time. A whole year older. Very impressive. Tony winked at Claire. Table 12 is ready for you. They were led through the restaurant, past tables full of families celebrating Christmas Eve, past the spot where Derek had walked out, past the memories of humiliation and heartbreak. When they reached table 12, Claire stopped. It was the same table. The exact same table where she'd sat alone a year ago, where Emma had approached her, where Marcus had been 3 tables away, watching his daughter's bravery with mortification. Now they were sitting together, all 3 of them, the empty chairs filled with family instead of absence. Emma looked around with satisfaction. This is where I found you, right, Claire? This is exactly where you found me. They ordered dinner, Emma insisting on breadsticks and hot chocolate with marshmallows shaped like snowmen. Marcus kept glancing at Claire with an expression she couldn't quite read, nervous and excited and tender all at once. After their entrees arrived and Emma was absorbed in her pasta, Marcus cleared his throat. Claire, do you remember what today is? Christmas Eve, 1 year since we met. 1 year since Emma walked up to you and changed 3 lives forever. He reached across the table, took her hand. A year ago, I was a workaholic widower who'd forgotten how to feel anything real. Emma was growing up watching her father go through the motions of living without actually being alive, and you were convinced something was fundamentally broken inside you. Emma looked up from her pasta, suddenly paying close attention. But Emma saw kindness and courage in a heart that had room for 2 strangers. Marcus's voice was shaking slightly. This year has been the hardest and best of my life. You walked into our chaos and didn't run. You fought through every doubt, every judgment, every moment of feeling like you didn't belong. Claire's tears were falling freely now. She didn't bother wiping them away. You proved to everyone, including yourself, that you're not just enough. You're everything. He paused, then stood up. Emma immediately scrambled off her chair and came to stand beside him, reaching into her dress pocket and pulling out a small velvet box. The restaurant around them went quiet, other diners noticing what was happening. Marcus took the box from Emma, then knelt beside the table with his daughter standing next to him. Claire's breath caught in her throat. Claire Anderson, will you marry me? Will you be Emma's mother, not replacing Sarah but adding to our family? Will you let us be yours forever? Emma couldn't contain herself anymore. Please say yes. We picked the ring together. It has a diamond and everything. Claire was sobbing now, unable to speak through the tears and joy and overwhelming rightness of this moment. She nodded frantically, then managed to choke out words. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Marcus opened the box with shaking hands. The ring was beautiful and simple, a single diamond that caught the candlelight and threw it back in a dozen directions. He slid it onto her finger, and it didn't quite fit, slightly too large, spinning loosely. Marcus looked stricken. I'll get it resized. I'm so sorry, I thought I had the size right. Claire cut him off with a kiss, laughing through her tears. It's perfect exactly as it is. Emma wedged herself between them, throwing her arms around both of them. We're a family now. A forever family. The restaurant erupted in applause, other diners celebrating this moment with strangers who were just trying to build something beautiful from broken pieces. Tony appeared with champagne for Marcus and Claire, sparkling cider for Emma, declaring it on the house. An elderly couple at the next table, holding hands across their own dinner, smiled at them with the wisdom of people who had been exactly where they were and knew how precious it was. January brought wedding planning and the kind of happy chaos that came from trying to blend 3 lives into one cohesive whole. Claire officially moved into Marcus's penthouse, her studio apartment lease ending and not renewed. Her few possessions looked small and shabby next to Marcus's expensive furniture, but he insisted they belonged, that her thrift store bookshelf and her grandmother's quilt made the place feel like home rather than a showroom. Emma helped Claire arrange her books, treating each one with reverence. These are yours, so they're important. They're just books, sweetie. But they're your books. That makes them special. They decided on a small ceremony in June at Marcus's beach house in the Outer Banks. Nothing elaborate or expensive, despite Marcus's ability to fund whatever Claire wanted. She'd insisted on simple, on intimate, on real rather than impressive. Ruth took charge of logistics with the efficiency of a general commanding troops. She had opinions about flowers and menu choices, about timing and guest lists, but always deferred to Claire's final decisions. Emma appointed herself flower girl and took the job with an intensity that suggested she was personally responsible for the success of the entire event. I need to practice walking slowly. That's the most important part. She spent hours in the living room walking back and forth with exaggerated care, holding an invisible bouquet narrating her own performance. And here comes Emma, the beautiful flower girl, walking very slowly and not rushing, even though she wants to rush. Marcus and Claire watch from the couch, trying not to laugh. She's taking this very seriously. She wants everything to be perfect for you. February brought Valentine's Day and a quiet dinner at home. Just the two of them while Emma stayed at Ruth's. Marcus cooked again, pasta carbonara becoming his signature dish, the one thing he could make without consulting a recipe every 30 seconds. They ate by candlelight, talking about the wedding, about Emma's upcoming transition to first grade, about Claire's students and Marcus's business expansion plans. Normal couple things, boring and beautiful, and exactly what Claire had stopped believing she could have. After dinner, Marcus pulled her close on the couch. I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Claire tensed slightly. Okay. Are you happy? Really happy? Not just content or making do, but actually happy. She turned to look at him fully, saw the vulnerability in his expression, the real fear that maybe she was settling. Maybe she was with him for security rather than love. Marcus, I'm happier than I've ever been in my entire life. I wake up every morning and can't believe this is real. You don't feel like you gave up too much? Your independence, your space, your life before this? I didn't give up anything. I added to what I had. I added you and Emma and Ruth and this whole life I didn't even know I wanted. She took his face in her hands. You're not a compromise, Marcus. You're the dream I didn't know how to dream. He kissed her then, deep and searching, and they made love on the couch like teenagers, urgent and tender, and laughing when they knocked over a lamp. March brought warmer weather and Emma's insistence that they go to the zoo again. The three of them walked through exhibits while Emma narrated everything with enthusiastic confidence. That's a lemur. They're from Madagascar. I learned about it in school. That's very impressive, Em. I'm very smart. Everyone says so. At the elephant exhibit, Emma pressed her face against the glass, watching a mother elephant spray water on her baby. Look how the mama takes care of the baby. That's what good mamas do. She turned to look at Claire, her expression suddenly serious. You're going to be a good mama, right, Claire? Claire knelt down to Emma's level, her throat tight. I'm going to try my very best to be. I think you will be. You already are, kind of. You do mama things like make my lunch and help with homework and hug me when I'm sad. Is it okay if I do those things? I don't want to make you feel like I'm trying to replace your first mama. Emma considered this with the gravity of someone much older than 6. You're not replacing her. You're just being you, and you being you makes me happy. Marcus watched this exchange from a few feet away, his heart visible on his face. When Claire stood up, he pulled both of them close. This little family they'd built from hope and timing, and one brave question on Christmas Eve. April brought spring and cherry blossoms and Emma's kindergarten graduation. Claire sat next to Ruth in the school auditorium, watching Emma receive her certificate with such pride that she forgot to walk slowly like she'd practiced. She ran up to the stage, grabbed her certificate, and pumped her fist in the air like she'd won a championship. That's my girl. Marcus was recording on his phone, grinning so wide his face must have hurt. Afterward, they took Emma for ice cream, and she wore her graduation cap the entire time, refusing to take it off. I'm a graduate now. Graduates wear their hats. Graduates usually wear their hats for the ceremony and then take them off, sweetie. I'm starting a new tradition. May brought final wedding preparations in a kind of happy stress that came from trying to coordinate travel for extended family. Marcus's relatives from Boston were flying in. Claire's parents and sister were driving from Ohio. Ruth was managing the catering, the flowers, the photographer, all with the kind of efficient competence that made Claire grateful someone else was handling logistics. Claire spent a Saturday afternoon at a bridal shop with her sister Sarah, trying on dresses. Nothing felt right. Everything was too elaborate, too expensive, too much like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. Sarah held up another dress, this one covered in beading. What about this one? I look like a disco ball. A very expensive disco ball. Claire sank onto the fitting room bench, suddenly overwhelmed. I don't belong in any of these dresses. They're for fancy people, and I'm just me. Sarah sat beside her, took her hand. Claire, you're marrying a millionaire CEO. You're allowed to wear a fancy dress. But that's not who I am. I'm a kindergarten teacher who buys her clothes at thrift stores. I don't know how to be the woman who wears these dresses. Then don't be. Be yourself in whatever dress feels like you. Sarah squeezed her hand. Marcus isn't marrying you because he wants you to be someone else. He's marrying you because of who you already are. They found the dress at a small boutique on the way home. Simple white cotton, fitted but not tight, no beading or lace or anything that felt like costume. When Claire tried it on, Sarah started crying. This is it. This is you. Claire looked at herself in the mirror and saw herself, not some fantasy version, just herself in a beautiful white dress, and felt something settle into place. This was right. This was real. June arrived with perfect weather, all blue skies and gentle ocean breezes. The day before the wedding, Claire stood on the deck of Marcus's beach house watching the sunset over the Atlantic. She heard footsteps behind her and expected Marcus, but it was Ruth who came to stand beside her. Nervous? Terrified, but in a good way. Ruth nodded slowly, staring out at the ocean. Sarah would have liked you. Claire turned to look at the older woman, surprised. Ruth rarely mentioned her late daughter-in-law, preferring to show her grief through action rather than words. I mean it. Sarah made Marcus promise to keep living, to find happiness again. She'd be glad he found you. Ruth's voice was thick with emotion she rarely showed. You're good for him. Good for Emma. You make them happy. They make me happy too. I know, that's how I know this is real. Ruth turned to face Claire fully. When you first started coming around, I was suspicious. I thought maybe you were after his money, or maybe you'd leave when things got hard. But you've proven me wrong about every doubt I had. She reached out and squeezed Claire's hand. Welcome to the family. Really and truly welcome. The wedding day dawned clear and warm, the ocean calm, the beach perfect. Claire woke up in one of the beach house guest rooms, her sister already awake and fussing with coffee and breakfast. Big day, how do you feel? Like I'm about to marry the love of my life. Good answer. They spent the morning getting ready, Claire's mother doing her hair while her sister did her makeup. Simple and natural, nothing overdone, just Claire looking like the best version of herself. When she put on the white dress, her mother's eyes filled with tears. My baby girl, all grown up and getting married. Mom, I'm 31. I've been grown up for a while. You'll always be my baby girl. The ceremony was set for late afternoon when the heat would break and the light would turn golden. Guests gathered on the beach, chairs arranged in rows on the sand, an arch of driftwood and wildflowers marking the spot where Claire and Marcus would exchange vows. Emma was ready hours early, her red dress pressed and perfect, her flower basket clutched in both hands. She'd insisted on red, a callback to the velvet dress from Christmas Eve, and Marcus had agreed immediately. Whatever Emma wanted for this wedding, Emma got. Ruth had gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose, surprising everyone with the announcement. If I'm giving my blessing, I'm doing it officially. Claire waited in the beach house with her father, watching through the window as guests took their seats. She could see Marcus already standing under the arch, his suit perfectly tailored, his expression nervous and hopeful, and so full of love it made her chest ache. Ready, sweetheart? Her father offered his arm. More than ready. They walked down a makeshift aisle of sand and shells, Emma going first with exaggerated care, scattering flower petals with the focused intensity of someone performing brain surgery. Claire followed on her father's arm, her bare feet sinking into warm sand, her eyes locked on Marcus, who looked at her like she was the only person in the world. When they reached the arch, her father kissed her cheek and stepped back. Marcus took both her hands in his, and up close she could see tears in his eyes. Ruth stood before them, her voice steady and sure. We gather here today on this beach to witness Marcus and Claire joining their lives together. This is not just a marriage, but the formation of a family, the blending of three lives into one whole. She looked at Emma, who was standing beside them, vibrating with barely contained excitement. Emma, you've been part of this story from the very beginning. What do you want to say to Claire today? Emma stepped forward, her voice clear and certain. I want to say that I'm really glad I walked over to your table that night. I'm glad I asked if you were okay. And I'm glad you're going to be my mama forever. Claire was crying now, couldn't help it. I'm glad too, sweetie. So glad. Ruth continued. Marcus, do you take Claire to be your wife, to love and honor, to support and cherish, through all the days of your life? Marcus's voice didn't waver. I do. Claire, do you take Marcus to be your husband, to love and honor, to support and cherish, through all the days of your life? I do. Ruth smiled, then turned to Emma. And Emma, do you accept Claire as your mama, to love and respect, to learn from and grow with? Emma's voice rang out clear and joyful. I do. Everyone laughed, the sound carried away on ocean wind. Then by the power vested in me by the internet and by the love I have for this family, I pronounce you husband and wife. Marcus, you may kiss your bride. They kissed while Emma squeezed between them, refusing to be left out of this moment she'd helped create. The small gathering of family and friends applauded, and Claire felt everything click into place, every broken piece of her past suddenly making sense because they'd led her here to this beach, to this man, to this child, to this family. The reception was on the deck, fairy lights strung between posts, music playing softly from speakers Marcus had set up. They ate and danced and toasted to new beginnings. Emma fell asleep on Ruth's lap halfway through, exhausted from the excitement, her red dress rumpled and her face peaceful. As the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Marcus pulled Claire away from the party, led her down to the beach. They walked to the water's edge, stood with waves lapping at their feet, the sound of celebration fading behind them. Mrs. Sullivan, he tested the name, smiled at how it sounded. That's me. Any regrets? Not even for a second. She leaned into him, felt his arms come around her. You? Only that I didn't find you sooner. They stood there in the fading light, two people who'd been broken and had learned to be whole, two people who'd met by accident and built something by choice. Behind them, their family celebrated. Before them, the ocean moved endlessly, constant and sure. Claire thought about the woman she'd been 18 months ago, sitting in a restaurant on Christmas Eve, convinced she was fundamentally flawed. That woman felt like someone from another life, someone she barely recognized, because that woman hadn't known that sometimes the worst moments are doorways to the best ones. That sometimes you have to sit alone and feel broken before a child with wild blonde curls walks over and asks three words that change everything. Marcus kissed her temple, his voice soft against her skin. What are you thinking about? About how we got here, about Emma seeing me crying and deciding loneliness was unacceptable, about how one question from a 6-year-old changed 3 lives. 5 lives, Marcus corrected gently. Don't forget my mom and your family. Ripples go farther than we think. Claire turned in his arms to face him, framed his face with her hands. I love you. I love Emma. I love this life we've built. I love that I get to wake up every morning and choose this, choose you, choose us. Choose us every day. His voice was fierce with feeling. For the rest of our lives, choose us every day. Deal. They walked back to the party hand in hand, husband and wife, ready to start this next chapter. Emma woke up when she saw them, ran to meet them halfway, and they scooped her up together. The 3 of them stood there on the beach as the last light faded, wrapped in each other's arms, and Claire felt something settle into her bones that felt like peace, like home, like everything she'd ever wanted without knowing how to name it. Later that night, after the guests had gone and Emma was tucked into bed and the house was finally quiet, Claire and Marcus stood on the deck, looking at stars scattered across the night sky. The ocean moved beneath them, constant and eternal, A reminder that some things lasted beyond single moments, beyond individual choices, beyond even the people who made them. Marcus pulled Claire close and she rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Steady, sure, real. Thank you. His voice was quiet, meant just for her. For what? For saying yes that first night. For taking a chance on us. For being brave enough to believe you deserved this. Claire smiled against his shirt. Thank you for letting a strange little girl walk up to my table. For not being the kind of person who would have dragged her away. Emma's always known things I was too scared to see. She saw you needed us and we needed you. All in about 30 seconds. Smart kid. Gets it from her mothers. The word still made Claire's breath catch. Mothers, plural. She was someone's mother now, Emma's mother. Not replacing Sarah, but standing beside her memory, loving the same child from different places, different times, different forms of forever. They stood there holding each other while the ocean moved and the stars watched, and somewhere inside the house, Amma slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that she had two parents who loved her and loved each other. Ruth was in the guest room, probably reading her mystery novel, content that her family had grown in ways she'd once thought impossible. This was family. Not perfect, not without scars and histories and complications, but real and chosen and built with intention. This was what happened when someone was brave enough to ask if you were okay, and you were brave enough to say yes to the help that followed. Claire closed her eyes and made a silent promise to that woman from Christmas Eve, the one who'd thought she was broken. You weren't broken, you were just waiting, and it was worth the wait. Marcus's arms tightened around her, and she knew he was thinking something similar, remembering the man he'd been a year and a half ago, hollow and going through motions, convinced the best parts of his life were behind him. They'd both been wrong. The best parts were every ordinary morning and evening that followed, filled with pancakes and homework and bedtime stories, and the kind of love that didn't announce itself with fanfare but showed up quietly, day after day, choosing to stay. The moon rose higher, full and bright, turning the ocean silver. Music drifted from a neighbor's house, someone else's celebration joining theirs across the summer night. Claire breathed deep, tasting salt air and possibility, feeling Marcus's heartbeat against her cheek, and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Tomorrow they'd wake up as a married couple. They'd make breakfast, and Emma would demand pancakes because she always demanded pancakes after important events. Ruth would make coffee and offer unsolicited opinions about wedding details that could have been better. They'd pack up and drive home to Richmond, and regular life would resume, unglamorous and beautiful. But tonight, on this beach where they'd promised forever, under stars that had witnessed countless other promises across countless other years, they held each other and felt the weight of what they'd built. Not just a marriage, but a family. Not just a relationship, but a home. Not just love, but the daily choice to keep loving even when it was hard, even when it was boring, even when it was just two people and a child navigating ordinary life together. The ocean whispered against the shore, ancient and patient, and Claire thought about all the people throughout history who'd stood on beaches like this one, making promises they hoped to keep. Some of those promises had lasted. Some had broken. But they'd all started the same way, with hope and intention in the belief that this time, this person, this love might be the one that lasted. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, if you were brave enough to let a little girl ask if you were okay, if you were willing to build something slow and careful and real, sometimes those promises did last. Sometimes they lasted forever. Claire opened her eyes and looked up at Marcus, found him already looking down at her, and saw her whole future in his expression. The ordinary days and extraordinary moments, the challenges they'd face and overcome together, the family they'd continue building with every choice to show up, to stay, to love even when it was hard. Ready to go inside? His voice was soft, reluctant to break this perfect moment. In a minute. I just want to stand here a little longer and remember exactly how this feels. How does it feel? Claire considered, searching for words adequate to the fullness in her chest. Like coming home after a long journey. like finding something I didn't even know I'd lost, like the beginning of everything. Marcus kissed the top of her head. That's exactly what it is. The beginning of everything. They stood there a few minutes more, not speaking, just being, and then walked inside together to begin the rest of their lives. The door closed behind them, shutting out the ocean and the stars, closing them in with sleeping child and comfortable beds and all the ordinary magic of family life. Outside, the ocean kept moving, patient and eternal. The stars kept watching, distant and bright. And somewhere in the universe, other people were sitting alone in restaurants, convinced they were broken, not yet knowing that sometimes all it takes is one brave question to change everything.